welcome back. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about debugging as well as some tricks and tips for Visual Studio. Some of those tricks will only be available in 2011, but most of them will be available in 2010 as well. Okay, so let's start off with the debugging portion. When you're debugging, you basically want to have access to the variables and also breakpoints so that you can stop the code at certain situations and see what's going on. So let's go ahead and write some stuff up here and debug it. So we're just simply writing the value of x to the console, and when you're debugging, basically what you want to do is set things called breakpoints. More than likely, there's other things you can do, but more than likely you want the code to stop at a certain line so that you can evaluate that code as well as the other variables that are within scope. So what you do is you click on this left hand side over here, this column right there, and it'll put a little dot there for breakpoint. And let's go ahead and fire the code up, and I'll show you some little tricks that you can do when you're debugging. Okay, so if we click on this button here, it fires up, and as you notice there's a little arrow right here. This shows that it's on this current line right here. It has not executed this line yet because you don't see anything down below in the output pane, but it has executed everything above it as well as any way that it got to it. If you hover over variables such as x, you can notice that it'll give you the value anywhere that you hover over it. Down in the bottom there's some different views that you can have. The output just shows the output of the program. For example, if I push F10, which is to step through the code, so you can see the arrow right there, you'll notice that I have an output of 5, so it went ahead and wrote the output of x. Right here, the Locals tab, this shows the current variables that are within the scope of where I'm currently at. And you'll notice that there's this object referring to the form 1, the form 1 that I'm inside, form 1 object. There's this sender object, which comes through as one of the parameters. There's this E object, which comes through as a parameter. Generally, unless you're specifically using those for something, it's not very interesting. This X might be the only interesting value in here because that's the only one that you really created and are concerned with. There's this nice Watch tab right here, which lets you create variables to view. So if you click the variable, you can get the value of it. There's also another cool thing you can do with it. You could do any sort of code that you can do. You can put it down in this watch area, and it's going to evaluate it for you, which is kind of nice. You can click through the object and get any other sort of key value that it maintains, which is kind of nice, especially if you're working with some sort of collection. The collection will show you all of the types inside of that, or sorry, all of the all of the values inside of that collection. Another nice thing that you can do with debugging is this area over here called call stack. And the call stack, let's just go ahead and move this over. Let's just go ahead and move this over right here. Call stack basically shows you where the lines of code how you got to your current location. So basically, if you step back through this right here, this is your current location. It's got the arrow there. If you double click on another location, it takes you back to the area that called that. For example, right here you'll notice that it got to the form 1 by this application run method. Created a new object, form 1, and then it popped into this area right here. You'll notice that if we look at the variables here, x is equal to 5 right here, but if we double click right here on the call stack, and if we try to evaluate, you'll notice it's x is grayed out, so x does not exist right here. So the nice thing about navigating this call stack is that you'll be able to see the variables that are at that current location, whichever ones are in scope at that current location, which can be really handy. Sometimes you get to, this is a kind of a simple example, but sometimes you get to a more complex example and you don't know exactly how you got there, so using this call stack lets you navigate backwards. And another cool thing that you can do is you can right click on the line of code right here, and you can use this little button right here, set next statement. And if you click that, you'll notice that the arrow comes back up here, and this will be the next statement that executes. So if you had some sort of code that you wanted to sometimes if you're not doing a 64-bit application, you could actually write code in here, but if it's 64-bit, it won't allow you to. So you could add some code in and then re-execute it. But another cool thing that you can do, if you go to this immediate window right here, you'll notice that I was doing some previous examples, but you can set x equal to some other value, and you can actually play around with the variables in here. And now x is equal to 10. If we hover over, we'll see that. So if we go through here, we'll notice that it output the 10 because we changed, inside this immediate window, we changed the variable. So the immediate window is kind of a way to override variables and kind of tweak things on the fly, which can be super nice. And let's see here. Those are the major high points. One thing with this debugging, there's two sort of ways to go down through the code. There's an F10 and an F11 button. The F10 will go down line by line, and if you create a method, it won't go into that method. It'll basically it won't skip over it, but in the debugging it skips over it, but it actually executes the code and it'll come right back to the next line. If you click the F11, it actually goes into that code, so every time you hit a method call, it goes into that method and it'll go line by line through that method as well. So that's the difference between F10 and F11.